So if you haven't already seen the video, you could go check it out. I did a drafting my top 10 antagonists, and so essentially instead of just going off of purely the quality of the character or just my preference, it's kind of a combination of both, where I tried to kind of make a roster, if you will, of the 10 characters that I'm most comfortable with combining quality and preference. That way there's a little more versatility within my roster, and it isn't just solely the 10 who I think are the best above all else, because again, that's a little bit tricky in and of itself. Now, I will get some honorable mentions out of the way, but before I do so, if you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, all of the good stuff. And so the first honorable mention I have to give is Luffy from One Piece. Luffy was one that was very close to making the top 10. However, I couldn't pick him above another one of my childhood favorites, and although I do agree at times a lot of the hate Luffy does get is undeserved, he just didn't make the cut. Naruto also is not on the list, who is one of, again, my childhood favorites, but I just couldn't pick him. Also, honorable mention to Oma from King and Ashura, and the biggest and final honorable mention that I need to give is Gintoki from Gintama, and the only reason he's not on this list is because I haven't seen Gintama. I read like 40 chapters into the manga, dropped it because I wanted to blow my own head off, and so as you can imagine, it's kind of difficult to rank a character that, well, I don't know anything about. And so moving on to number 10, the most controversial that's probably going to be on this list, considering that I picked him instead of Luffy or Naruto, and that's Goku. Goku was the first protagonist that I was ever introduced to into anime. I understand some people have that childhood attachment to maybe Naruto or Luffy, but for me, it's always been Goku. I felt like my list would have been a little bit incomplete without at least having the icon that is Son Goku. And honestly, I don't think he gets enough credit for being a really good protagonist, at least in the original Dragon Ball, and being pretty good in Dragon Ball Z. Now, of course, I think it would have been much better for him to have stayed dead and let Gohan take the mantle, but we got what we got. And so I perfectly understand you picking some other shonen protagonists above Goku, for instance, Edward Elric from Fullmetal Alchemist. But on top of him just being literally the hero of my childhood, the icon that he is, he also adds some nice versatility to this list, so Son Goku at my number 10. Now at my number 9, I have a JoJo on my list, and if you saw the antagonist video, same rule applies here. I can only pick one per series, and if I had to pick out of all of the protagonists, or the main protagonist of each JoJo part, again, I have not read part 8, I have to go with Johnny Joestar. Now, my personal favorite is Jonathan from part 1, and I know the fan favorites are like Josuke, Giorno, and Jotaro, but I didn't want to pick Jotaro or Giorno because I just genuinely don't think they're better as a protagonist than Johnny. I think a common criticism you can have to all of the JoJo protagonists is that they get outdone by their side characters, which is an extremely infuriating thing to kind of rank them now on this list. But I think Johnny kind of encompasses the best of all of the JoJo protagonists. I think he's an extremely fun character to read. He definitely has one of the bigger developments throughout all of the JoJo protagonists, along with like Jonathan, for instance. And despite him being a bloody cripple, he's actually one of the protagonists that puts in the most work, and you could argue puts in more work than their side characters. Also, part 7 overall I think is just a better written and compact story, so I think Johnny definitely benefits from that. So again, at my number 9, Johnny Joestar. Now my number 8 is also going to be slightly a controversial one. In fact, I think 8, 9, and 10 are the most controversial on the list. But at number 8, I have Sinbad. Here's the thing when it comes to Sinbad. Sinbad is an interesting case because at the end of Magi, he definitely serves as more of the antagonistic role, right? But in Adventures of Sinbad, he is the protagonist of his story, and Sinbad is my second favorite character ever below, well, I think you all know who number 1 is. You could definitely argue Alibaba, I'm fine if you have Alibaba, I needed to have Sinbad on a list, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna put Sinbad here. I genuinely love his character, and he's one of the protagonists that I've honestly loved seeing grow up, despite him quite literally fitting the quote, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become a villain. Sinbad, when he served the role of protagonist, did it extremely well. It's sort of like the whole thing with Luffy changing the world around him. Sinbad kind of did it, just better. Although I will admit, Magi had a pretty rough ending, to put it nicely. So yeah, at my number 8, I have Sinbad. Now, at my number 7, I have Dr. Tenma from Monster. Now, Dr. Tenma was a little bit difficult considering that his counterpart, Johan, is one of the greatest antagonists of all time. I don't think you can drop Johan below top 3. I just don't think you can. Tenma, on the other hand, is an extremely well-written character as well, speaking to how he's in my top 10, but as the case was with some of the antagonists on my other list, Dr. Tenma is someone I'm willing to kind of drop within my draft compared to some of the other ones that I think I have more of a priority picking first. I think all of the picks I have from here on out are in the same tier of quality, if you will. It just depends on which one I think does it a little better than the other and which one I would have to prioritize picking first. Again, if you haven't read Monster, I highly suggest that you do so. Now we move on to number 6. At my number 6, I have Gon from Hunter x Hunter. Here's the thing when it comes to Gon. Gon is a character that has a peculiar case, being that the way he started in Hunter x Hunter, I would have never expected him to be this high up or to even be in a top 10. He starts off as your very typical shonen protagonist, bright, cheery, optimistic kid who's going to change the world, blah, 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 blah. But the kid goes absolutely nuts. Now, if this was outside of just main protagonists, I would definitely pick Kurapika or Killua above Gon. But since I'm kind of picking the main guy, it has to be Gon, and his development within Hunter x Hunter is phenomenal. Now, again, a character like Gon and some of the other characters that will be later on this list can move up or down depending on the ending of their mangas, but I think anybody who's read Hunter x Hunter can agree Gon has to be somewhere within a top 10. Now we move on to the top 5, and honestly the top 5 is a list that I'm honestly really proud of. This top 5. Now shout out to the boys in the Discord who helped me out with this, because I knew who was going to be in my top 5, just not exactly the order I was going to put them in. Well, more like the order of 2 through 5, because I mean, I think you should all know who number 1 is, right? But at number 5 I have Light Yagami from Death Note. Light is a very good example of your protagonist not exactly being the good guy. He is an extremely well done character, and something that I really do love seeing from a protagonist as well as the antagonist is that they contrast and parallel their counterparts beautifully. Now Death Note did definitely fall off after L died, but are we really going to put that on Light even though he kind of killed him? Besides the point, I think it really does speak to the brilliance of Light's character to have such a tension and ability to command a presence despite not literally swinging a punch at somebody. But I don't really think you need to swing a punch when you have a book that could kill anyone just by writing their name in it. Now you could argue who's the better character between L and Light, but since I'm choosing my top 10 protagonist and I didn't put L in my top 10 antagonists, I had to do Death Note some justice by putting Light here on this list, and he's definitely worthy of a top 5 spot. And I'm fine if you switch Gon and Light, but I'm pretty confident with having Light at my 5. Now my number 4 is a character who could definitely move up, but could also move down depending on the ending, since it's pretty close with Attack on Titan. And at number 4 I have Eren Yeager. Now ironically, he was the reason I couldn't get into Attack on Titan years ago. Like, I'd be trying to watch the show and he'd just be like, I'm gonna kill all the Titans. And I was like, nope, can't do it, kill me. But similar to how Gon eventually develops within his series, he's a character that goes from 0 to like 100,000. And the interesting case about Eren's character that is a good but also at times is a bad is that he does start off pretty mid in my opinion, but once things really do kick up in Attack on Titan and then you look at it through retrospect, you kind of notice the brilliance between Eren's character. But you could argue that there are a few protagonists that were better than Eren from start to finish, while also still having that kind of level of development and growth within their story. And that's kind of what I have in my top 3. Now, moving on to my number 3, I have Thorfinn from Vinland Saga. Now, I kind of had an analogy for these next 3 characters, well, Thorfinn and then the 2 above him, as to how they kind of develop his characters and how beautifully it's done. And I compared Thorfinn to kind of a war veteran who's battled, who's kind of lived through it, and now that he's away from the battle and he has some time to relax, he can reflect on his past life and notice how all of the bloodshed and anger he had within himself was pointless. His dynamic with Askeladd is one of my favorites, hence why Askeladd was also in my top 10 antagonist list, spoilers I guess. But Thorfinn, along with who's at my number 2, are characters that I'm perfectly fine with being at number 1. Like, if someone's like, yeah, I have Thorfinn at my number 1, I'm not gonna diss it or knock it at all, although I respectfully disagree. But I'd definitely be surprised if Thorfinn wasn't in anybody's top 10. Actually, I'd be very surprised if Thorfinn wasn't in most people's top 5. Now, at number 2, we have a character that I would say is very similar to Thorfinn, but in a slightly different style, and who I prefer mainly because Vagabond is like my second favorite manga of all time, and that's Musashi Miyamoto. Okay, so kind of like imagine Thorfinn, right? But as a samurai. This is pretty much what it's kind of like. And it's kind of splitting hairs between these two, if I'm being really honest, because again, the way that these two characters develop is very similar, as they go from kind of like these animalistic killing machines to these wise men, and we see them really grow up in front of our eyes. I just really prefer the way they did it with Musashi, because Vagabond as a whole has a very strong philosophical touch to it. I also really love the dynamic between Musashi and his good friend Sasaki, and honestly, Musashi was somebody I was not gonna let slip past my top 3. Now, at my number 1, I have Boruto. Now, listen, I'm kidding. Relax. I was gonna troll. Listen, I was stuck between trolling y'all with Deku, Kirito, or Boruto, but I just had to pick Boruto because, you know, it's fun. Okay, but honestly, at my number 1, I have Guts from Berserk. I'd honestly be very surprised to see Guts not be in somebody's top 5 if they've actually read Berserk, or unless they just don't like seinen and they're doing it based off of preference, not quality. But if I'm combining the both of them and I'm drafting, like, there doesn't matter. Preference, quality, or draft, Guts is going number 1 for me in all 3. I think Guts has one of the, if not the strongest case, as one of the best written protagonists, one of the most human and realistic, that covers everything across all boards and seems to check every single box. And look, honestly, I don't know what you expected, especially on a more Berserk channel. I had Griffith as my number 1 antagonist. I have Guts as my number 1 protagonist of all time, and I think that honestly speaks to a series where you have 2 characters where I don't think you can honestly deny their top 3 in their respective category. So before I get into a 10-minute rambling as to why Guts is better than your favorite protagonist, because that would just, honestly, that'd just be me being a bully at this point, we're gonna wrap up the video there. If you are new to the channel, again, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications. Hibbity booba, I think I already explained it at the beginning. This has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.